Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Baldrige Foundation's quarterly webinar. As a reminder, due to the high number of participants, everyone will be kept on mute during the presentations. If you have questions, please submit them to the moderator in the Q&A box located on your control screen. Presenters will answer questions during our panel discussion. Here is today's agenda and featured guests. Our guest presenters today are from AARP, and they include Chris Gardner, Vice President of Futurecasting, Joe Pugh, Enterprise Risk Management and Compliance Director, Jacqueline Baker, Vice President of Startup Programming. Following their presentations, we will have questions moderated by myself, Al Faber, CEO of the Baldrige Foundation. After that, we will have brief updates from the Baldrige program from Bob Fangmeyer, Ryan Lassiter, the Alliance for Performance Excellence, and Stephanie Norling, the Executive Director of COE 2026. A few closing remarks. And now it is my privilege to turn the presentation over to our guest panelists. Chris?
Thank you, Al. We are so glad to be here with you all today to share a bit of AARP's journey on the road to intelligent risk-taking. Like Al said, I'm Chris Gardner, Vice President of Strategic Intelligence, or what we call Futurecasting at AARP. I'm joined by Joe Pugh and Jacqueline Baker. We'll each be telling a part of our story. Let's start with a brief introduction to AARP for those who may not know us. We are a nonprofit social mission organization with a membership who serve people 50 years old and older in the United States. We have about 38 million members. That's about 1/3 of all people in the US who are over 50. Our purpose is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. We've been around for over 60 years and have been continuously guided by our founder's vision of a society where all people, including older ones, can live with dignity and purpose. Our core competencies are knowledge of the 50+, communications expertise, and advocacy expertise. Through our research group and our Public Policy Institute, we conduct and publish in-depth research and position papers on major topics of interest to the 50+, such as economic security and healthcare. With our communications, we have unparalleled reach and engagement and provide trustworthy information via teletown halls, webinars, e-newsletters, social media, and especially via our AARP magazine, which is the world's largest circulation magazine. And AARP advocates at both the federal and state level for financial, healthcare, and consumer policies and legislation. We operate in all 50 states, and we have a network of over 60,000 volunteers. With these assets, we make a meaningful impact. For example, AARP helps people save real money, including $2 billion annual savings from member discounts in key categories like travel and insurance, and over $1.4 billion in tax refunds through our AARP Foundation that runs a free tax aid service for 2.5 million taxpayers annually. We are a fierce defender, advocating to strengthen core programs like Medicare and Social Security, fighting for $29 billion in prescription drug savings, fighting against fraud and against age discrimination, especially in the workplace, and advocating to advance greater support for caregivers. And we're a trusted friend offering reliable information. For example, this past year, AARP's Coronavirus Hub page generated 3.9 million backlinks, more than comparable pages hosted by Johns Hopkins or the New York Times. And we've been recognized for our leadership as a most ethical organization, as a top place to work in the DC region, as a top innovator, and of course, most recently, as a very proud recipient of a 2020 Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. In our review, examiners highlighted specific strengths that include senior leadership, strategy implementation, culture of innovation, organizational learning, and intelligent risk-taking, and that were managed as a unified whole. And of course, they identified opportunities for improvement, like the need for more consistent product management competency. Remember that, because we'll be coming back to it a little bit later. Today, what we want to share with you is our ongoing intelligent risk journey. AARP, like many organizations, continually aims to strengthen and balance the relationship between innovation, strategy, and risk in order to succeed in our rapidly evolving world. We've sharpened our risk identification and management. We've evolved our strategy to take greater account of the ever-emergent future, and we've grown our innovation capacity and worked to interrelate each function more thoroughly over time. The challenge is to get the balance right between acceleration and caution, with an ever-increasing organizational awareness that overcautiousness in today's world actually increases risk of failure. So let's level set on some key concepts as we dive in. The Baldrige Chronicle of Leadership and Management article, The Intelligent Risk Equation, argues that most organizations take a downside view of risk, meaning when an organization thinks of what its risks are, they predominantly and disproportionately consider from the perspective of threat and not from the perspective of opportunity. And often when they do think of taking an opportunity risk, it's because the chips are way down and the organization is searching for a recovery option. Very few organizations have mindset, culture, and processes in place to continuously surveil, evaluate, elevate, and pursue upside risk. But upside risk is where the magic happens. So developing processes, behaviors, and mindsets that smartly and repeatedly stretch the organization's comfort zone is a critical part of intelligent risk-taking. At AARP, intelligent risk-taking is bolstered by not only the processes of risk, strategy, and innovation functions, but also by the aligned mindset championed and modeled by AARP's leadership. As our CEO, Joanne Jenkins, likes to say, we, the executive management and board, all think of risk even when we aren't having a risk conversation. So importantly, our talk today is not just about repeatable processes, but also about fostering mindset. We're going to take you through an overview of each function with a close-up look at select features. And to get us started, I'm going to turn it now to Joe, who will take us through AARP's approach to risk management.
Great, thanks, Chris. And again, I am Joe Pugh, and I lead the Enterprise Risk Management Program here at AARP. So let's talk a little bit about Enterprise Risk Management, or ERM, is really, as I will refer to it and what I call it, and how we integrate risk with strategy and innovation. On the slide, you see it really sets the stage for how risk informs our strategic planning process, represented in the middle by the OODA loop, and then our strategic plan on the right. And Chris is going to go into both of those functions a little later in the webinar. But in terms of risk management, we position ERM really as a strategic-centric program, meaning we evaluate risk and opportunity through the strategy lens. And this aligned mindset is really the integral part of the strategic planning process. And when you think about what enterprise risk management or a risk management program does, it comes down to this. It equips management with the tools and mindset for evaluating risk and opportunity to potential strategies so that that decision-making is aligned and more informed. ERM is integrated with strategy and innovation, and specifically in the risk identification and risk assessment process. We use multiple inputs to inform our risk profile, including Futurecasting that Chris will speak to a little later. And then we also, when we assess risk and opportunity, we do this in relation to our risk appetite, which I'll talk about in a little later. One way that we integrate risk and strategy in the identification process is that we have management think about two questions. What are the risks to the strategy? In other words, what are those things that may stop us from achieving or doing our strategy? This could be talent management or really anything. And risk of the strategy is the second one. And this would be risk brought on or potentially brought on to the organization because we are doing the strategy. We use these two kind of prompts to really enable the organization to connect risk and strategy in that decision-making process. So now I'd like to walk you through our ERM journey, some high points of it, and give you some insight into what our transformation has been for the risk management program. Becoming a risk-savvy organization and having a risk-aligned mindset is really, it is a journey, and you're going to hear that throughout my section here. It really takes time. I've gathered some information on this slide that provides a snapshot of our ERM journey beginning pre-2010 through now. Creating an ERM discipline in any organization evolves over time, and creating the mindset of intelligent risk, it does not happen overnight. And as you'll see. So on the left of the slide, beginning with prior to 2010, during this period, we had a very basic risk management function. We had a lot of folks doing risk management, but there wasn't a formal process in place. There was not a lot of collaboration, and there wasn't a tight integration with strategy. So between 2010 and 2013, we really developed an ERM framework, set the stage for that. And we derived it from the COSO framework, which was one of 2 widely accepted risk management standards that organizations use to help manage risk in an increasingly turbulent and unpredictable business landscape that we live in right now. And using a top-down approach in this time period, we spent time building really a good ERM foundation, putting in place a common risk taxonomy, focusing on a portfolio of critical risk to the organization, and having conversations around the importance of linking and connecting risk and strategy. And this really led to the beginnings of intelligent risk mindset at AARP. So between 2014 and 2017, we focused on aligning risks with management and the board, as well as defining and articulating our risk philosophy or risk appetite. Both of these efforts were game-changing risk activities to our risk management program. And I'm going to dive into what we did in just a minute. But for 2018 and now, really forward, this is really where we are today. We had an outside assessment of our risk management program, and some of the comments came back that said risk and strategy is part of AARP's DNA. And that's really what we want to hear and where we want to be. We want it to be top of mind in any conversation. As Chris said, our CEO, it's always in the conversation, whether they actually bring it up or not. It's always being talked about. So let me dig in a little deeper on some of the activities that we did that changed really the dynamics of the risk program and really the overall risk culture at AARP. This was around the 2015 timeframe is really when our risk program kind of transformation started. We realized that we needed a more aligned mindset around risk taking. We recognized that the behavior of not taking risk is a risk in and of itself. So in order for us to create a culture of innovation and take those bold, thoughtful, calculated risks and make risk-informed decision-making in the boardroom, we needed an understanding of risk-taking in the organization. We embarked on a journey to build a board and executive risk partnership to really transform the way the organization viewed risk-taking. And the goal here was really alignment. We wanted to ensure that there was an aligned mindset on risk-taking at the board level and at the management level. So some things we spent time on. So the first thing we did was we created a risk working group, and this included a mix of board members and management. We wanted the board to be involved at some level in the process. And as a group, we discussed and mapped out some ERM activities that we thought would foster a more risk-aware mindset. And the value of creating this working group conversation and collaboration was really the value, is that all these conversations that ensued and the collaboration between board and management, that's really what led us to create this risk-aware mindset. The next thing we did was we spent time on education, just through documents explaining the risk management process. We wanted to ensure everyone had a really good foundation and understanding of what the ERM process includes, and we wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page. The next thing we did was we had the board and management take a confidential risk assessment survey where we prioritize our enterprise risks. And in the past, this was typically done just with management. So we decided to include both the board and management and compare the results, because we wanted to know, was everyone in agreement on the top critical risks to the organization that align with strategy? So we compared the results. We looked at risk perceptions of each group. We evaluated alignment. We looked at any gaps that appeared, and really the executive team, discussed the overall results, and we recommended, what the top 8 critical risks, which is what we focus on, and we call them tier 1 at AARP, and we presented them to the board for approval. The next thing we did, we really wanted to kind of embed more of a risk and opportunity mindset with both the executive team and board. So we had a breakout session at one of our board meetings for a tabletop scenario workshop. And here we presented 2 different scenarios for the groups. One was focused on an upside positive opportunity driven scenario. as Chris mentioned earlier. And then the other scenario was more of a downside threat, negative, a cyber type event, if you will. So we had the executive team and board members mixed up at various tables. They discussed the scenarios. They identified risk and opportunities in the scenarios. They identified mitigating efforts were present, or maybe ones that might be missing and we needed to really explore further. So all of these activities you see here really changed the dynamics of our risk program. The board felt more comfortable with the process. They felt better armed to have risk-informed conversations, and they just had a better understanding of AARP's risk-taking ability and how it aligns to the strategic plan. But we also realized that focusing on these activities in risk management allowed us to see that we needed to articulate our risk philosophy, or risk appetite, as I call it, more formally. So by using the momentum of that board and management combined risk working group, we set out and tackled AARP's first risk appetite statement. Next slide there, thank you. And this risk appetite statement exercise was it was an important exercise for management. For example, we explicitly articulated that with respect to innovation risk appetite, the board expects to see greater risk taking and even failure. So this really signals that risk appetite serves a strategic purpose. It provides the organization's risk-taking philosophy that aligns to the critical risks. So our tier 1 risks, as I mentioned earlier, it's really those top 8 critical enterprise risks, including innovation, are baked into the risk appetite statement. And this provides context on which risks we want to take and which risks are unacceptable to take. And because we involved the board in all of those activities and the whole process of developing the risk appetite, they were actually our risk advocates in the boardroom when we presented the first risk appetite statement to the full board. During the creation of the risk appetite, we had lots of conversations, back and forth drafts, and really this interaction completely really changed the way we discuss risk in the boardroom and how it ties to strategic decision making. So as you can see, and to facilitate a risk mindset, both leadership and the board need to be aligned in terms of risk taking. So let me summarize just a few of the hallmarks that led to the board really supporting this intelligent risk taking mindset. So the board reviews risk scorecards for our tier 1 risks, for those top 8 risks, at every board meeting. So we have a risk scorecard with various information for each risk. Our committee charters include and require risk oversight and review of risk. Risk is formulated in the creation of our annual and 3-year strategic plan. And as I mentioned earlier, the risk appetite statement was developed using both the board and management, and the board approves the statement. So this guides leadership on how much risk to take in executing strategy. And knowing this frees up leadership to act more quickly, more nimble, and more adaptive. So board and leadership take a regular risk assessment survey, as I mentioned, and that really sets the tone and for the risk and prioritizing the top risk to ensure alignment, basically. So I hope you can, I've visualized here is how the risk transformation, it took several years. And as I said, it doesn't happen overnight. But for us, spending this time to focus on that aligned risk mindset really allowed us to cultivate an environment of intelligent risk-taking in that decision-making process, which I think is key. Now I'll kick it back over to Chris. You can talk a little bit about our approach to strategic planning.
Terrific. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.
So with a clear assessment of risk, as well as a clear sense from leadership of our risk appetite, we can plan confidently for long-term impact. So first, it's important to understand that just as with risk and innovation, it's leadership that sets the tone and the foundation for pursuing a bold, future-backed strategic approach. So in December of 2016, the board and the E-team deliberately expressed a need to better understand, anticipate, and respond to the rapidly changing external environment. And they explicitly declared their aspiration to be transformational, both for the 50 plus and ourselves. So our strategy development starts with long-term impact in mind. At the outset of planning, we affirm with leadership a clear vision and 10-year impact statements for the 50 plus and for us. Strategy development then works backwards. We determine mid-range goals that must be met in 5 to 6 years to achieve our desired long-term impact. These mid-range goals then serve to define the strategies, objectives, and tactics for the most immediate, nearest in 3 years. The strategic planning process itself uses the OODA loop. It's a model that has 4 process stages: observe, orient, decide, and act. We began using the OODA loop approach after a rigorous process assessment, settling on the OODA loop after benchmarking with 2 prior Baldrige Award recipients. It's used for both the 3-year plan and 1-year action plans. At Observe, we conduct a comprehensive review of research to inform the strategic context. The use of futurecasting techniques and insights, which I'll detail in a moment, allow us to identify that context better, potential blind spots, risks, and opportunities for the organization. At Orient, we begin with those envisioned outcomes 10 years out. Senior leaders use theory of change logic models like those commonly used in social sciences to work backwards, creating those short-term and long-term outcomes, and to define strategies. At Decide, strategic plans are developed for each of our enterprise issues. Financial planning is conducted in tandem to ensure that financial resources are aligned to expected outcomes. At Act, action plans are developed and then regularly monitored to drive effective execution. Now, futurecasting is a key part of future-backed strategy development. It is a structured approach to evaluating trends and forces that will affect AARP strategy and our ability to make impact at scale. As I alluded to, futurecasting is a relatively new function. When the board and executive management declared their transformational ambition in late 2016, they took stock of what competencies would be needed to foster change and adaptability. And a key competency gap identified at the time was futurecasting. So since then, we've evolved futurecasting to be a significant input to AARP's decision-making. Futurecasting develops and delivers foresight by cultivating a deep understanding of enduring external steep social, technological, economic, environmental, political trends. Trends like aging population or advancing technologies, as well as the disruptive forces that emerge when 2 or more of these trends intersect. Disruptive forces like tribalism or creator economy, and the emergent signals, which are isolated events, like the fact that in 2020, the winner of the online game Fortnite took home a larger payout than the winner of Wimbledon. These signals that foretell larger impending changes on the horizon. We leverage this understanding to frame the big picture, identify root causes, connect dots, shine light on potential organizational blind spots, and highlight emergent opportunities, and draw out implications specifically for AARP. Disciplined foresight requires us to explore and envision, that is, actively, intensively, and imaginatively consider the future environment, and then determine what we must do not only to fit into it, but to actively shape it. Crucially, while there is repeatable disciplined process, which I'll speak to in a moment, it is also undergirded by an always curious mindset and guided by core futurecasting principles, including especially to look far out on the horizon with fresh eyes, to seek a diversity of perspectives, especially external ones, and ask what if, to surface signals and patterns, and to apply ultimately to the business. The futurecasting process itself is a 3-step process, starting first with identification. We evaluate signals and trends using the STEEP framework to set an agenda of topics for deeper analysis. We speak with futurist organizations, we speak with experts, participate in conferences, study market intelligence reports to identify critical trends and opportunities. Then analysis takes many forms, ranging from monitoring to substantial deep dives. Examples include STEEP scans for specific enterprise issues conducted at the outset of planning to sharpen strategic focus on emergent risks and opportunities specific to an enterprise issue area, like caregiving or work and jobs. Market scans and deep dive strategic reports explore and document in detail emergent markets and trends that point to opportunities or risks that leadership must proactively consider. An example of this is our healthcare disruption, Future of Healthcare report, about which I'll share a little bit more detail momentarily. And strategic assessments evaluate AARP's position, our strengths and weaknesses relative to external trends. For example, we're finalizing a thorough report and set of recommendations on the future of media monetization. And application is the final stage, working actively with stakeholders to determine next actions. We increasingly do this via highly structured, facilitated working sessions, asking stakeholders to systematically work through implications, opportunities, challenges, barriers of key trends or analyses. Foresight is integral to the planning approach. Of course, it's integral to the strategic planning at each stage of the OODA loop, providing a profound understanding of that external landscape, helping to inform clear-eyed evaluation of our capabilities and gaps, and helping especially via structured stakeholder engagement to align for action. So this graphic illustrates how these elements come together. You see elements of our strategy on the left, and on the right are the trends and disruptive forces that we in Futurecasting are currently focused on analyzing. Some of these things are downside risks for us, like product management, a capability that we are not as effective at as we need to be. And Jacqueline's going to talk a little bit more about that later. Others represent the upside risks, like gaming, a rapidly growing space with more and more adult players, a space in which AARP has a firm foothold with our current games offering, but that will require significant change on our part to capitalize on it in the future. As a final example of how all of this comes together, our relatively recent work on healthcare disruption helps illustrate this. Throughout 2019, in conjunction with expert stakeholders, Futurecasting completed an analysis of disruptive forces in the delivery and accessibility of healthcare, including heightened consumer expectations, technological advances, increasingly embedded and distributed sites of care, regulatory changes, and a focus on social determinants. Then in December of 2019, we structured an entire day steeped in emergent healthcare for the AARP board and executive management, looking out to 2030. That Futurecasting analysis broadened perspective, aligned understanding, and sparked a sense of urgency. This then set the context for structured, facilitated dialogue where board and management evaluated a set of bold plays. With the board's guidance, this has led concretely to the development of 2 potential ventures that are currently in progress. Importantly, because the board and executive management had already committed in principle to a transformational direction and clarified their higher risk appetite for innovation, they were able to embrace exploration of more cutting-edge ventures. This in turn gave management not just direction, but also clarity that they could move forward with speed and confidence into emergent opportunity spaces, taking an intelligent risk with leadership's full support. This is just one example. I'm going to turn it now to Jacqueline, who's going to talk about how our innovation function and practices help to make the taking of intelligent risk a repeatable process at AARP.
Thank you, Chris. What a pleasure to be here today. As we venture into the world of innovation, I get the opportunity to take you on a journey. I know that you've heard several words being repeated a couple of different times by my colleagues, Joe and Chris, and I too will repeat a couple of words because there are a few words that define our overall innovation journey. Words like intelligent risk, mindset, culture of innovation, and of course, journey. Now, the OODA loop that Chris mentioned just a short while ago also guides our innovation work as well, specifically 2 areas, observe and orient. We use the strategic planning process to also guide where we search for the next cutting edge solutions that help shape the world that we live in and for people as they age. And these two specific areas, observe and orient, consist of course, gathering insights, understanding challenges and opportunities, understanding market conditions, and underneath orient, we're also looking for the evaluating of market positions, the validation of purpose, vision, and values, and also identifying key areas of focus. Now, this innovation journey that we've been on has truly been rooted in sound foundational pillars that guide and support our work. And so I want to take you through what a few of those foundational pillars have looked like. Of course, when the world opens back up, we'd be happy to have you join us in what we call our hatchery. That's our 10,000 square foot innovation lab located in the heart of Washington, D.C. And that is where we do our work. It is where the innovation lab team does their work. It's where we welcome in startups, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later in our presentation. Now, our overall hatchery presence has been there for upwards of 5 years, which has really been just about how long this innovation journey has been going on, probably a little bit closer to 6 or 7 at this point. But the hatchery is our first foundational pillar. In addition to that, our I6 programming, which is our innovation programming, was a really important introduction for us on our journey. Every single staff member had the opportunity to become well-versed in how we talk about innovation throughout the organization. It makes it a lot easier when everyone is on the same page, using the same words and operating in the same way. And so our I6 programming has been a key pillar on our innovation journey. Additionally, design thinking, keeping humans at the center of what we do, is a core function. We want to make sure that the things that we build, they keep the end user in mind. We find this to be so important that we have an entire practice, an entire group that's dedicated to human-centered design. And last but certainly not least, on our foundational innovation area or foundational practices area, we rely heavily on pitch competitions, not just externally, but also internally as well. We know that our resources are some of our most valuable and key assets within the organization. And so every single year, we enact a pitch competition that allows us to cultivate some of the best and brightest ideas that serve both our members and also us internally. These 4 key pillars are essential and have been critical to our success in the innovation area. I mentioned a short while ago that innovation is both idea generation and it is also execution as well. This innovation journey that we've been on has truly been rooted in several things, but it is incredibly important that as we develop additional ideas that we have a sound foundational process that we're leaning back on. So I want to talk to you a bit about what our innovation management process looks like. It really involves using stage gate governance to limit risk. It is, in fact, an effective, systematic, and integrated approach to delivering innovations across the organization. We've talked a bit about the culture of innovation and how it's foundational to what we do. Of course, we rely on our strategic planning process to provide us with clarity in the areas that we find new innovation. But I want to tell you a little bit more about how we develop and validate concepts next. Now, our innovation management process is really an 8-step process involving, of course, the culture of innovation, evaluating stakeholder requirements, identifying strategic opportunities, developing concepts, which I'll tell you about next, evaluating those concepts, an iterative process of both implementing prototypes and measuring the results, of course, making sure that we're having some learnings, and then making a decision on if we're going to integrate or discontinue those ideas that have come to be. This process is incredibly important for us because while we do move quickly within the innovation realm, we work to ensure that we have a sound innovation management process that guides our work. Now, going back to our overall idea process that we utilize in order to come up with these ideas, I want to take you through what we call our rapid prototyping model. And this is truly where the magic comes to life. We like to ensure that we provide the opportunities to come up with some sound ideas, but to make sure that we're iterating on them quickly, making adjustments to them, moving forward or not. Our rapid prototyping model allows us to develop concepts really in 4 quick steps. It allows small groups to come together to ideate and discover. We build concepts based on those ideas. We build rapid prototypes using different model usages. And then also after that, we develop, we improve, and then we develop additional low fidelity prototypes further to validate. This rapid prototyping model allows us to quickly go from an idea to finding out if something will actually be a thing. Does it make sense to move it forward? We would much rather not come up with a lot of ideas, spend a lot of resources and money on things only to find out that they're not going to work. And so this rapid prototyping model allows us to quickly take ideas and test to see if they're going to grow into something further. Now, in addition to rapid prototyping, it's very important that we have a sound management process. In addition to a lot of the other processes that I've taken you on and I've shared with you, I have to go back to the word journey. And the word journey is important because as we are quickly developing the ideas into something greater, we have to make sure that our journey involves managing the process. We make sure that at every level, there is some level of governance to ensure that we're making sound decisions and that we are incorporating, of course, our risk mindset, but more importantly, that we're taking intelligent risks. There are 3 ways that we deeply dive into this management process. Number 1 is there's a project team that makes those quick day-to-day decisions. Number 2, we make sure that there is senior leadership that overall guides products and projects. And third, and most importantly, we implement and have historically embraced something called a growth board. This growth board allows a go, no-go decision. It simply guides us to find out and really make the decision on if we're going to move forward with an idea or if it doesn't make sense for a number of different reasons. Now, I want to share with you a bit of the learnings that have occurred as a result of us going through our innovation journey. Now, of course, culture of innovation has been key to the work that we've been doing. And that, of course, has been an important component of the work that we do in innovation, and it continues to permeate. We also have dug deep and have been deeply committed to the world of product development. And that has been a big learning for us, which I'll come back to in just a second. Startup engagement, which is a key pillar of what we do as well, it continues to this day, which I'll tell you a bit more about on the next slide. I want to jump back to product development just for a second. In addition to all the things that we learned on our journey, we quickly learned that product development, while it is important, and it's important to come up with new ideas to solve and to also tackle challenges for the people that we serve, we learned that product development isn't an area that we specifically shine bright in. And so instead of us wasting resources and realizing that it's just not an area that's going to move the needle quickly for us, we decided to remove our key focus on product development. Now, the places that we actually focus and coalesce in, they look a little bit more like this. I want to share with you the 3 areas that we do spend our time in the most now, which are void of product development, a distinct focus on product development. Now within AARP Innovation Labs, and specifically in our innovation work, we focus in 3 key areas. We focus on innovation challenges, we focus on pitch events, and we also focus on accelerator relationships. We look to find some of the best and brightest startups all across the country and beyond to help and guide the work that we do in the innovation area. Our innovation journey has truly been one that has resulted in identifying and collaborating with some of the best and brightest startups that align with and deeply contribute to the AARP mission. While we've had massive learnings along the way, including our exploration into product development, our commitment to a culture of innovation, taking intelligent risks, and embracing an innovation mindset have been key pillars of our success. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Chris Gardner, who's going to bring it all together for us.
Thanks, Jacqueline. So setting optimal conditions for intelligent risk-taking requires different functions of the organization to be aligned around a common ambition, as well as a shared understanding of the organization's tolerance for risk-taking. This is first and foremost set by leadership, who steers the alignment, in our case, towards transformation across all levels of staff and board and across functional units. Then our risk management team lays the foundation with executive management and board to define risks and, importantly, align on risk principles and a broadly agreed upon risk appetite. Strategy leverages disciplined processes and capabilities to identify and analyze intelligent risk opportunity spaces that can be decided upon by leadership. And innovation leverages agile processes to explore opportunities in a manner that de-risks them for the core organization. Ultimately, these work together to create an ecosystem that fosters stronger, better, intelligent risk-taking. And of course, the journey is not done. We'll continue to strengthen the processes and capabilities, both within each enabling function and the connections between them. We thank you for your time today and look forward to the discussion. Al, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Hey, thanks, Chris. And thanks to you, Joe, and to Jacqueline. That was just an outstanding presentation. We've got a number of questions from the audience here, and we're going to begin with one for Joe. Joe, the first question to you is, can you share some of the tactics that you use to improve the risk IQ and broader risk and opportunity thinking at AARP?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, when I think of that question, I really, one of the things we did in 2015 was it was fine to be risk aware, but we wanted to be risk savvy. We wanted to get the board and management risk savvy. So it was really, the things that we did was having the conversation about, what it means to connect risk with strategy and always looking at it through the strategy lens. Talking with management about, if we identify, a bucket of top risk, how do those align with our strategy? Is there clear alignment? And a lot of it, was really around conversations. And, as I mentioned in my section, we did some scenarios, tabletop scenarios also to kind of really, put it in action about how they needed to think about opportunity and risk, because, opportunity is a risk, but it may be worth it to take it, particularly if it falls within our risk appetite, which is fine. So, it's really kind of training that your mind to think about, risk and opportunity kind of collectively as you, evaluate new initiatives or new projects.
Thanks, Joe. Our next question from the audience goes to you, Jacqueline. Is innovation only encouraged, managed, and executed within a certain group?
That's a great question, and the answer is definitively no. It's actually exciting that innovation can permeate and is allowed to permeate across the entire organization. I mentioned in my presentation that we have an annual practice, which ironically we're in the season of right now, which is our staff pitch competition. And that is where we have the opportunity to harvest in the most positive way, some cutting edge ideas that we can ultimately hopefully bring to life. We also very much look at innovation in two different buckets. There is incremental innovation, and there's also disruptive innovation. Incremental innovation is that everyday innovation that occurs at any of our desks. It could simply involve how can I better move a pencil from here to here, and everyone has access to do it. You don't need to have any special skills, tools, or information around it, quite frankly, anything outside of what our I6 training has taught us, which I spoke about a bit earlier. Over in the Innovation Lab, which is where I serve at as Vice President, we do a bit more of disruptive innovation. How can we turn things completely on its head, of course, with intelligent risk in mind. But innovation is truly one of those things that we are proud to make accessible to everyone across our entire enterprise.
Fantastic, thank you. Chris, here's one for you. With Futurecasting, you've got a lot of process that involves stakeholders at top of doing the actual analysis and reporting. How do you balance the need to conduct sufficient analysis with the desire to engage with staff on each project?
Yeah, that is actually a very good question. And what I will say is this is something that a lot of my peers at other organizations who are in similar kinds of functions. So typically you might experience this function in your organization more like a competitive intelligence function. And one of the things that is what I would call a trend among these kinds of strategic intelligence functions, competitive intelligence, futurecasting kinds of functions, is the shift towards more stakeholder involvement. So there's been a tendency historically to put a lot of time and energy into the analysis itself in order to convince or persuade by fact or by data point. And while that is very, very important, what we increasingly understand is that human decision-making is a very, very complex, multifaceted kind of, I'll call it an adventure. And so convincing the organization, influencing the organization, moving the organization into a new direction, especially into an emergent future direction, requires not just the facts, but also, or the analysis, but also helping to bring people along on the emotional journey, helping to get people excited, invested. So stakeholdering is a very important element of this function, because you need to make sure at the end of the day that people are going to not just understand why you might be making an argument, but be willing to follow you into that space, follow you onto that island of opportunity, because they've invested in it, not just analytically, but also, emotionally, also as kind of a whole person. So we deliberately spend more time thinking about stakeholder management strategies, how we can enlist, how we can involve, at what stages of our work do we do that. So that's an important thing. And I would say that balance is probably, closer to 50-50 than it has ever been in a function like this before.
Thank you, Chris. Joe, we're going to come back to you. Can you briefly describe how the risk appetite statement has been operationalized? Sure.
That's a great question. And it's usually a question that comes out on almost all risk management webinars, only because it's something that a lot of people struggle with. I think, you can have a risk appetite statement, go through the process, but you don't want it to become just, a piece of paper that sits on a shelf that collects dust. So operationalizing it is really, it takes some time and effort. And what we've done really is, as I went through my section, we developed the risk appetite with our board and management, collectively, and the board reviews and approves that every year. So it's into our board materials. It's part of the strategic planning process, where, it's definitely a resource, a tool that is reviewed and accessed. During our risk assessment process, it's definitely one of the tools that we use so that we know, what risks are in the risk appetite versus what risks aren't. For example, we have innovation, which is part of our risk appetite statement. So, all of our critical risks really are baked into that risk appetite statement. So it informs, so it can help inform decision making. And, it's an addendum, as I mentioned earlier, in the strategic plan that's referenced. So it's a full picture that the risks that we've identified as part of our strategy are in alignment with our risk appetite statement.
Thank you, Joe. Jacqueline, we're going to come back again to you. With so many startups that pop up every day, how do you decide who to work with and minimize risk while working with them?
I have to say that really 3 key words come to mind for that question: allies, advocates, and intelligent risk. And I know technically that's 4 words. I'm counting intelligent risk as 1 word. But I say that because you need allies across the organization to believe in what you're doing, right? Because it's not a matter of just, randomly picking companies. You need allies. And luckily that has deeply been rooted in our culture of innovation, just people believing in the work that we do from an innovation standpoint. Advocates fall right in line with that same thinking. But intelligent risk is really important. And the reason why it's important is because just as the question indicates, there are tons of different solutions to different things that pop up in the vein of ensuring that we're serving the people that we want to serve and laddering up to our mission effectively. But for us, we make sure that those entities across the organization, our very stellar and accomplished policy team, our very stellar and accomplished legal counsel are involved at the key components of decision making, so that there's buy-in, and so that we're looking holistically at what situationally, what are the risks with this startup? What are the potential wins? But more importantly, how comfortable are we with the fact that this may be a startup that is introducing technology that none of us are comfortable with, none of us know very much about, but we do believe that it can change the future and change the way that we live our lives and the people people that we serve live their lives. And so it is truly making sure that we have a holistic view of the startups that we're bringing to the table. We're managing the risk, making sure that we have a healthy appetite with it, and that we tap into our allies and advocates across the organization. That's a great question. I love it.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Chris, we've got one more for you. What happens in the future back planning model when facts on the ground inevitably change, AKA best laid plans?
Yes, that's always a tough one. And basically, while I didn't go deeply into it in this conversation, that ACT stage of the OODA loop includes a pretty rigorous monitoring approach, monitoring set of processes that we do throughout the course of the year. So anybody who is in charge of a part of our strategy is never farther away, never more than like 3 months away from being able to adjust some part of their plan based on the facts on the ground. Either they need to accelerate something, or they're not quite on schedule with some element of their strategy. So we've built in mechanisms essentially in that ACT stage of the OODA loop to monitor, but that helps us to adapt the strategy as needed, make those pivots as needed to keep the strategy moving forward in the big picture while the facts on the ground change in the immediate term.
Outstanding. Well, hey, as a reminder to the audience, we've got a few more questions here that we didn't have a chance to get to with the time remaining. But what we are going to do is pass them along to our panelists, and we are going to take those questions and get you back a written answer sometime in the next week or so. As a reminder to everybody also, within 48 hours, the presentations will be posted on the Baldrige Foundation Institute for Performance Excellence website. So Chris and Joe and Jacqueline, outstanding job. Thank you so much for sharing these great best practices with us here today. And congratulations again on being one of the newest cohort of the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to turn over for a few updates to the Baldrige Enterprise and begin with Bob Fangmeyer, the Director of the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program. Over to you, Bob.
Thanks, Al. And my thanks to the panelists as well. Great job. It's wonderful to see you. Great to hear your information. So I want to share a quick update on the Baldrige Program strategic plan. So if we would go ahead to the first slide. So we have 3 strategic objectives for the program. And each of these has several goals and a variety of initiatives. The objectives, as you can see on the left-hand column, have been consistent for nearly a decade now, but the goals, the initiatives, and our action plans continue to evolve. It should also be noted that the initiatives are almost all beneficial for more than one of the strategic objectives, and many are both interdependent and mutually beneficial. So again, on the left-hand column, our strategic objectives are sustain the program, increase reach and impact, and strengthen the Baldrige enterprise. Under sustain the program, you can see 3 of 9 separate initiatives that we have going on. And I won't go into detail on these. I know we're tight on time, but just to say that when it comes to our funding requests, regardless of the size or the focus of the specific request, they all include funding that supports all 3 of our objectives. As many of you already know, we have had and will continue to have, unfortunately, retirements of longtime staff members. So managing that while also hopefully growing the program is an area of strategic need. Our digital modernization initiative includes an online interactive interface for applicants, examiners, judges, and framework users. It also would include a virtual interactive version of the Baldrige Excellence Framework. In addition, as others have had to do over the past year, we had to convert our examiner training to an entirely virtual experience. And this worked really well, and we're looking at feedback from the examiners. We'll also be looking at performance data from the award process, along with other considerations as we plan for examiner training in 2022. This fall, our intent is to move towards a hybrid site visit that will leverage the advantage of last year's virtual site visits, as well as the unique advantages and opportunities that are provided by an on-site site visit as well. So the on-site portion will be abbreviated. That's the plan for this year. Under increasing reach and impact, you can see 3 of 10 different initiatives. Others that are not listed include our engagement in and support of communities of excellence, which you hear a little bit about, and the addition of community as the 7th Baldrige Award category, along with manufacturing, service, small business, healthcare, education, nonprofit. For the new wide Baldrige video, we surveyed Alliance members to get their input, and we're working with NIST's award-winning video team, and we hope to have that video available for use by the entire enterprise sometime this fall. Our workforce excellence initiatives continue, but they are likely morphing into a slightly different focus. Some of you will remember with the last administration, we were working with the President's Award for, my goodness, Papa, I've now forgotten the first part, but in any case, for their initiative around the Pledge to America's Workers. This year, we are looking at moving that towards likely a job quality or a quality job framework that would be both nonpartisan and non-prescriptive. We also have partnered with 2 Alliance programs and 2 MEP programs, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership at NIST, to develop a Baldrige-based assessment for manufacturers to ascertain their preparedness for and their adoption of advanced manufacturing or Industry 4.0, otherwise known as Industry 4.0 technology solutions. And we have around 6 initiatives for strengthening the Baldrige enterprise. All of them focus on increasing collaboration, integration, and providing for common systems across the Baldrige program and the Alliance. And I'd just like to highlight one new initiative, and that is sharing examiners across the Baldrige program and Alliance programs. It's not entirely new. There have been many, many examiners who have done both, and sometimes in a particular order, sometimes first with a state program and sometimes first with Baldrige, et cetera, and now in recent years also serving with communities of excellence. So it's not entirely new, but the new twist this year is encouraging national examiners to support either communities of excellence or an Alliance program that is in need, whereby the national examiner who has been selected and been trained but is not serving on a national examiner team will get credit as a national examiner if they serve with communities of excellence or with an Alliance program. So, very quick overview. I know we need to move on, but we're very excited about the progress we've made and about increasing the alignment and integration within the Baldrige enterprise. And so now I'll turn it over to Brian and Stephanie.
Terrific. Thank you, Bob. Thanks, Al, and the foundation. I just have one slide, Chris, if you want to move to the next one, and I'll be very brief in my updates here. Welcome, friends. Nice to see all of your names on the line. I think my slide may be coming up. There may be a delay, but real quick update. If you don't know who the Alliance is, we are 29 programs covering all 50 states and US territories. Last year, we did about 600 Baldrige applications, 167 of them full applications, 1,600 examiners, and 300 other volunteers. So it's a sizable network of Baldrige-based activity across the United States. We launched a professional development series earlier this year in March, did another one in May, and have scheduled roughly quarterly these full-day workshops online. You can hit our website for more information on that. The fall conference, the Baldrige Fall Conference, is hosted by the Alliance this October 21 and 22, also online. And we welcome several new members. You see them listed here, both program members and supporting members. If you're interested in joining the Alliance and supporting excellence across the United States, contact me or hit our website. And you see some of the other activities we're involved in too. I won't get into them, maybe next time, but we're excited to serve as the feeder system and the front door for many organizations starting their journey to excellence. With that, we'll go to Stephanie Norling of Communities of Excellence.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to be here today. If you would go to the next slide, please. We have a number of opportunities right now and a number of programs going on supporting communities in the adoption of the Baldrige-based Communities of Excellence framework. Today, I want to focus on our National Learning Collaborative because we have an exciting opportunity for communities to join us for next year's cohort. We currently have 20 communities involved in our 3-year National Learning Collaborative experience, which then moves into an alumni group. Communities come together to build leadership capability and capacity and are addressing issues such as transportation equity, literacy, workforce development, opioid crisis, and more. Here you can see the key dates at a glance for when this begins, and I would encourage you all to consider whether your community is ready to embark on this journey and adopt the Communities of Excellence framework, and whether your organizations partnered with others in your community are ready to be a part of this experience. So if you're interested, you can visit our website. You see the information here below, coe2026.org, and contact me. I would be delighted to speak with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. Great update. I would like to remind everybody that there are a number of online training opportunities available on the Baldrige Foundation's Institute for Performance Excellence website. Several include Lean and Six Sigma courses, as well as Scrum Master, Diversity and Inclusion, Project Management, and Data Analysis. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Baldrige Foundation Institute for Performance Excellence special webinar featuring AARP. And once again, thank you, Chris, Joe, and Jacqueline for such an outstanding presentation. Watch for more webinars soon to come from the Baldrige Foundation Institute for Performance Excellence on our website. And have a great day.